have made an undertaking to recover the time to finish on time. So the fifth block talks about Latin American experiences. I'm just going to say 4 or 5 things to set the scene, things that were said yesterday in the opening session and in the opening session. And then after setting the scene, we'll hear about the different situations in the countries of the people that are here with me. We talked about a contrasting system of waste management in Latin America, where we heard and we saw some graphs with leading edge solutions, and the other with open landfills. 2% of the recovery of waste in Latin America is through formal systems, and the informal sector represents between 25 and 50%. And with the Inter-American Development Bank, they speak of some 4 million people who live off of the systems of waste management. We'll talk about this in Panama. It's a clear element in terms of waste management. Alfredo Rim talked about momentum, about the interesting change that was occurring from the point of view of the construction of the legal and governance structures. One of the panels this morning said that there are framework laws in place, but they have the problem of developing the regulations, the legislation from it, and problems with the system of governance. Once, the ministries are set up, to take it down to a local level is complicated. There was this gap which was hard to overcome. Figures in terms of the rate of coverage of refuse collection, very high, 98% in virtually all Latin American towns. They have a waste collection service, but notwithstanding, from the point of view of local policy, only 20% of the town councils have some kind of waste handling system in place. And I think from what we were saying yesterday and today, I don't have experience in the Latin American continent, but I have kept an eye on it. Energy recovery seems to be, at least in a reasonably short-term horizon, something of interest, economically speaking, in terms of investment and profitability. And I think the energy vector disappears from the agenda. The question of landfills, the formal side, one of the priorities was then to adapt the informal sector, and governance is another of the priorities of the region. So we have 3 people with us here on the panel. First of all, we're going to hear from Argentina with Ricardo Bertolina. Ricardo, who is the executive director of the Argentinian network, and he is coordinator for the sustainability policies in the municipality of Rosario. Carlos spoke about this, about direct emissions, that despite the national inventory, the emissions were of little weight. Here in Spain, we're talking about 3 and 4, but those that are avoided through intelligent waste management system. Jose Gallego gave an example yesterday of the tin can, or the aluminium can, he was saying how we can avoid the use of raw materials, water, electricity, and so on and so forth. All of this action in terms of climate change is not something that is actually assigned to this sector. In Europe, the European Environmental Agency and the German Federal Agency says that the contribution of waste management in Europe could represent a reduction of up to 25-30% of diffuse emissions. if the management of waste is adequate. With Ricardo, we'll hear about that. We'll also hear about Brazil. Brazil is always referred to as a continent within a continent, 200 million people, fifth largest in the world in terms of waste generation. I believe that only 35% of the towns there have selective waste collection plans. We're talking about some 50,000 direct employees, an estimation of 600,000 in the informal sector, and notwithstanding only 30% of all of these townships, and this is one of the big problems, have a waste collection tax paid by the citizens. And we'll end up with experience 3, Panama. Carlos is the president of ABREPLE, an association of private and public companies in Brazil, and he's the vice president of ISWA. And we'll end up with Alida Spadafora, their waste collection program 2015-2035, where social inclusion and collective responsibility seems to be one of the drivers for the design of this ambitious project. And then something which struck me, and I mentioned with him very briefly yesterday, here in Spain and in Europe, we talk about a horizon of 2030, 2035, if we're talking about the Paris commitments. But Panama speaks of an ambitious plan. We'll hear about it in detail, together with the investments of 2015-2035. That sounds very good. It sounds ambitious, and we're very interested in hearing what Alida has to tell us about this. So with no further ado, please do stick to your assigned time. If we have time at the end, we'll field a round of questions. So whenever you're ready, Ricardo, the floor is yours. Good morning to you all. Thank you very much for having invited me. It's a pleasure for me to be again in a Relagres Congress, and particularly here in Spain. So let me tell you that I've been working with waste management for some 30 years in Argentina, and basically for much time what we did was to work on waste in terms of eliminating contamination and involving the citizen. But for some years now, in terms of the new world agenda, which is related to climate change, we've seen a new thrust in terms of waste management. And the question of climate change is serving to strengthen the idea that we have in that respect. First and foremost, let's talk a little bit about the Argentinian network against climate change. Then we're going to talk about the inventories, the participation of emissions from the waste sector in Argentina, just as we've seen here in Europe. We're going to give you some facts and figures there. And then with waste, what the idea is with the waste management, and what we're specifically doing today in Argentina with this new global agenda and the relationship between waste and climate change. When we're talking about the Argentinian municipal network against climate change, it's the first in Latin America. It started some 7 years ago, and today it comprises 130 townships of between 3,000 and 1.2 million inhabitants in different points in the country. We're talking about some 9 million people who live in the towns that make up this network, and today it's coordinated by the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, which is the largest organization there is, which is a combination of the Bloomberg organization and the Pact of European Mayors. In that respect, just a month ago, we kicked off an approach to learning the work that has been done in the European townships, and this is helping us to very quickly update our agenda in Argentina. One of the first things that we've done in Argentina is the inventory of local greenhouse gases. It's very hard to look at the participation of local government in climate change unless you have a local diagnosis of the situation. And in this respect, we developed a method some 3 years ago, and we showed the local governments how to develop their own greenhouse gas inventories. With an agreement with ICLE, we've developed the GCP system, which is the universal system, and some 80 townships have done it in Argentina, and therefore making it comparable to other local governments around the world. When towns joined the global covenant, they show the world what they're doing. They give an inventory and they show the risk plan for each of them and how they're adapting to climate change, and they have to present their plan to tackle climate change. And that's the direct relationship here that we have with waste management. The commitment on these 3 points: each township that joins the Global Covenant commits to develop these plans in 3 years. So all local governments that participate in the Argentinian network undertake to make what they are doing visible in terms of what they're doing to combat climate change. And here we can see the emissions per hectare of each of the towns, the per capita emissions, and all of the factors that involve the generation of greenhouse gas. The greenhouse gas inventories were performed in some 70 towns, and here we can see the national average of greenhouse gas, which is 9.83 in Argentina, and we see how each of the townships that has performed an inventory has different levels of emission. And it's very important because we, like other countries, have our national inventory, but if a town doesn't know what the driving factors are for the generation of greenhouse gases on a local level, it's very hard for them to make political decisions to help reduce such emissions. When we see these charts, there are towns that, compared to the national average, generating 5 times more. And in the case of Argentina, this is closely related to the agricultural sector. And now we're going to see this, but waste management, in some cases, is responsible for some 20% of the emissions of a particular area. We're going to see as we're going to see now, the national average is very different. This is the level of participation of waste in Argentina in terms of the generation of greenhouse gas. In Europe, we've seen that it's some 2-3%. In Argentina, we're talking about 4%. And here we can see the 4 factors that define the national inventory, that is to say, where greenhouse gases are generated. As you know, in terms of waste, such emissions come above all from 2 sectors. One is the processing of solid waste, 49% of emissions, and 50.8% of emissions correspond to wastewater, and only 0.2% is related to incineration. As we can see, and as has been said previously in the case of Argentina, it's not a particularly relevant sector, even though I insist for local governments, it is of great importance in terms of developing strategies to reduce local emissions. As you know, greenhouse gas emission in terms of waste treatment is related above all to the generation of methane through, in general, anaerobic processes that occur. You know that methane is actually 18 times stronger, the effect of it, than carbon dioxide. So we need to reduce the emission of these greenhouse gases, and that's why we are looking at the same inverted pyramid that we talked about in one of the previous meetings, where the main problem that we have to deal with is prevention. As was said clearly before, the consumption of raw materials and energy during the process of manufacturing of goods, if we can reduce that, we will impact emission, this 4% that we were talking about, but also we could avoid far more locally in terms of what we're able to do in the prevention of the generation of greenhouse gases. When we talk about prevention in our towns, and Barcelona was a clear example for us, there's an enormous number of programs that we're developing in our townships to avoid waste generating greenhouse gases. And as I say, this is the first target that we've set ourselves on a municipal level, particularly accelerating participation from our local inhabitants, the citizens. We have the Repare program in Rosario, where we are encouraging people to reuse resources rather than go out and buy new clothes, new machines, home appliances, and so on and so forth. This means avoiding buying new shoes, new clothes, new appliances, and extending the life of what we've already got. Virtually all of the the towns in the network have eliminated the use of plastic bags. We're returning to the use of cloth bags, and in terms of recycling, we're also encouraging that. Okay, the second point that we've looked at is the generation of energy from waste. Unfortunately, in Argentina, biodigestion is not such a big affair, but there are certain towns that have developed their own biodigesters to deal with the organic fraction of waste. In this case, and we heard about this yesterday in terms of the township of Cerrito, the township of Emilia, where not only are they converting the waste into energy and biogas, not just domestic waste, but also the waste from the agricultural sectors in each of the towns. This is the clearest option that there is for our towns. We're talking about basically small towns and villages in Argentina that are looking at this kind of technology, a biodigester. If we're talking about towns of 10,000 inhabitants, we're talking about a cost of some $10,000. So it's not too much money, and can also involve the citizens in it. There are different organizations such as Rotterdam universities who have provided funds. One town was actually financed by the German consul. ensuring that the town properly engages in selective collection. You can see the cases of methane where there is a very low release of methane, but here, above all, we're locally generating energy to cover all that the town requires. What we're talking about in terms of a biodigester, it's a very low release of methane, and the methane is converted into carbon dioxide, and this is considered biogenic, and so is not part of the calculation. The third alternative in terms of waste management, and this is what we're seeing at the moment, in terms of the different depth landfills. As you've seen and as we have heard about in different countries in the region, according to the IPCC, depending on the depth of the landfill, the emissions will vary. And if it's a sanitary landfill with or without combustion, we get a different level of greenhouse gases. So it depends on the system we're using. In fact, today, without a doubt, we have to eliminate landfills. That's the proposal. In Argentina, most sanitary landfills do not have gas capturing systems as a source of energy. What we've done in these 70 towns where we've worked, you can see it in this graph, we've seen the per capita generation of greenhouse gases, that's the red dots, and according to the level of emission, that's the height of the column, and the color is the kind of waste treatment that is engaged in. So, according to the form of processing and generation, we can see that there's different levels of greenhouse gases. That's what we were saying at the beginning. Not all towns have the same levels of greenhouse gas emissions, but there are many factors that come into play which determine how we have to tackle the problem. Given this, our towns have put out a call, and what the idea is for all of the towns to have their climate action plan, how they are going to go out and reduce the greenhouse gas emission, and this is updated every 2 years. The first inventory was carried out in 2014, the next one will be 2016. And that by year end we'll have all of the data for this, and on the basis of this, the local climate action plans are developed. What we did not so long ago was to hold a meeting in Buenos Aires with 83 towns and mayors attending. Each mayor presented 3 projects which were posted on the internet, made visible, and companies from all over the world, embassies, cooperation organizations, stated their interest in providing solutions for the projects that the towns were engaged in. And together with this, we had 300 simultaneous meetings, each mayor with a counterpart who offered them different technologies. In general, the mayors were more than satisfied with the corporate proposals they received from the different players who were at the meeting, because they reveal the next steps to be being taken. Above all, they were talking about figures. One of the mayors said, well, how much is this going to cost us? So they started looking at numbers, looking for the different alternatives they required within the framework of the climate action plans. When we told them that each of the mayors presented, when I said that each of the mayors presented 3 projects, what we can see is that of the 132 assessed, of those projects assessed, I'm going to wind up now, yes. This is to do with the generation of waste. The rest is to do with sustainable management, agriculture, cattle raising. So the percentage of projects that concerns the mayors with regard to climate change, the second was waste management. Of this, 68 projects, of which 46 were directly related to waste, but 11% were related to the energy valorization of the waste. A few years ago, they weren't even on the agenda. Today, it is something which concerns our local government to see how in waste management they can include energy valorization. So basically, that is what we're doing. The results of the inventories, the conclusions, incorporating a new motive to treat waste properly. Today, the mayor, when they go out to talk about waste management, they do so within the framework of the Climate Action Plan. They tell us why we have to work with waste and how that is related to climate change. There aren't going to be any more sanitary landfills. We need to eliminate them. It's a complete waste of resources, and this is on the agenda for all our townships. It's not sufficient to manage pollution. What we need to do is to generate energy and employment. We were talking about this throughout the day, the generation of green work, green jobs. The policies aimed at prevention are the most important in terms of the generation of greenhouse gases, and composting at home competes with energy generation. It's important because it stimulates citizen participation, and we need to pay particular attention to the energy valorization of waste treatment, as I mentioned before. So thank you very much for your attention. Very good. Thank you very much, Ricardo. I didn't introduce myself before. My name is Leandro Barquin. I'm director of the Ambiental Foundation, and we are responsible for the organization, the technical secretariat of this Relagres meeting. Let me just remind you, we insist a lot on this, but some people seem, there have been a few problems in terms of times. Tomorrow, we're going to organize a visit for the Relagres delegation at 9. The coach will pick you up at the Ateneo Hotel, which is in front of the beach. They're waiting for us in Gavà Viladecans at 10 o'clock in the morning for the pack sorting plant, a definite landmark plant in terms of this sort of waste treatment in the metropolitan area of Barcelona and in Spain. At the end of the visit, we're going to be having a working meeting with the Barcelona Metropolitan Area Organization, with politicians and managers, to see what is done in the Barcelona metropolitan area in terms of waste management. And then after that, those of you that have a flight in the afternoon and have your bags in the coach will drop you at the airport, and the coach will go through Barcelona if anyone wants to go sightseeing in Barcelona, and then come back to Metro. Having said that, now, thank you for your attention. We're going to go on to Experience 2 Brazil, Shared Responsibility and Public-Private Cooperation. Carlos Silva, President of Abrelpe and Vice President of Israel. The floor is yours, sir.
So much for your invitation. It is always a pleasure to be here in Barcelona at this event organized by Relagres, and to be able to contribute something to this discussion and to exchange information and experiences between Spain, Latin America, and of course we have a lot of commonalities. I'm going to speak about our experience in terms of waste management. What are some of the challenges, prospects, and possibilities? Our starting point is the National Act on Solid Waste. It was a federal law adopted in 2010, which is our lighthouse nowadays, guiding waste management policies in Brazil. This law shows us the principles, the goals to be attained. And of course, everything that was in place before 2010 had to be properly streamlined and transformed in order to comply with this law. It is quite a modern piece of legislation. It contemplates possible ways forward, possible futures. There are also ambitious principles contained in the law. For instance, there's a distinction to be made between refuse and waste, according to the law. Therefore, there's also a difference between the end goal or end destination of that particular waste and the final disposal. So when we say that type of waste is collected and then sorted and dumped into a landfill, we need systems that allow us to remediate and to recover and to make the proper use of this waste. We also have a law that contemplates the end of any unit for waste management that does not comply with that legislation. Open landfills are to be shut down and dismantled. The law in Brazil also establishes a hierarchy in terms of waste types. This principle is based on a European principle. Therefore, there are several actions that need to be fully implemented, but following this hierarchy, starting with prevention, non-generation, reuse, recycling, recovery and treatment, and at the very end of this process, the disposal of any waste. The law also imposes a planning process at every single level, the federal, state, and municipal level. There must be waste management plans in place. And of course, all of these different political institutions need to also implement what we call reverse logistics, which is the way that we interpret this principle of polluter pays, or the producer pays. This was quite an innovation for Brazilian law. We have what we call shared responsibility principle, which is slightly different to extended responsibility, which is in place in Europe. We have this shared instead of expanded or extended responsibility, and I'll dwell on it a little bit further. Since we implemented this law, there are some key points, some key issues that need to be worked upon. Stronger emphasis need to be put on those issues. Let's see exactly which of these issues are a priority. First, we have a growing generation of waste. We have 207 million inhabitants, 85% of which live in urban areas. Brazil is one of the countries that with the highest urbanization rates in the world, which means that we had 79.9 million tons of municipal solid waste in 2015. And as I said before, Brazil is the fifth country that generates more waste in the world. And this has been so since 2005. There's been an increase of 25% of waste generation since that year. And this period embraces 2005 all the way to 2015, so 10 years in which this generation of waste has kept growing. What are the prospects for the future in Brazil? By 2030, we're talking about 228 million citizens. Now, if this means that waste will continue to grow, we'll probably have about 90 million tons of urban solid waste a year in our country by 2030. So along the same lines of growing generation, if we compare 2010, the year in which this National Solid Waste Act was adopted, we had 195,090 tons every day of solid waste or urban solid waste. But in 2015, which is the latest data, 218,874 tons a day. So you can compare what has happened since this law was passed. We started working on prevention. Before that, nothing had been done on that particular front. That's why we keep increasing generation rates. Now, the second issue that needs to be dealt with is that sometimes this waste is taken to a site that is not the most adequate. We have nearly 3,000 open dumpsters or landfills in Brazil, and nearly 40% of our municipalities use this kind of irregular landfills or dumpsters. We're talking about 34,000 tons a day. 42% of our waste is dumped onto these garbage sites. And according to our own studies at Abrelpa, we're talking about 76.5 million inhabitants that are impacted and suffer from these policies of just dumping garbage, dumping trash onto these irregular sites. And that has a yearly cost, both environmentally and from a health point of view, of nearly 11 billion reals a year. Of course, environmentally speaking, this has repercussions, but also health impacts of this inadequate policy, soil pollution, water pollution, and that cost is very high. And of course, our country must pay for that every year just to keep those open dumpsters running. The third issue that needs to be considered when we talk about waste management and the law is what we call integrated management. We keep working so that this management system is more and more integrated every day. Unfortunately, that's not the case yet. We have a linear waste management model. After consumption and discarding or eliminating that waste, all of it is processed as refuse and is sent to these inappropriate dumpsters. So in terms of numbers, when we talk about recycling today in Brazil, out of nearly 80 million tons a year, we have 1 million ton of what we call the dry fraction, which is recycled in Brazil. And then we have 400,000 tons a year of organic fraction that is composted. So it's quite a broad spectrum that still needs to be developed. Then there's this fourth issue, which to us is key, and we actually believe is the most important of them all, is funding. How do we finance, how do we fund all of these new projects? Well, this is quite a concern for us, those of us who work on waste management systems in Brazil, because Brazilian cities are investing today nearly 10 reals per person per month in order to cover all the costs involved in solid waste management systems. So we're talking about collection, cleaning, transfer, and usage, as well as the preservation and cleaning of parks and public squares and marketplaces. All of the services that municipalities consider to be cleaning and sanitation and waste management have a cost of 10.15 reals, so approximately 3 euros per person per month, to be able to pay for all of these services. And in Brazil, that means you cannot even afford 2 cups of coffee. So they are more expensive than that, with only 10 reals and 15 cents. That's as much as you can get. If we compare this to other public services, well, they are much more expensive. We could talk about cell phone services. Pretty much every citizen owns a mobile phone, and the amount they pay every month is much more expensive than just 10 reals. Everyone has internet access at home, and they also pay more than that. So this cost is quite reasonable and affordable for all municipalities. However, citizens are not ready yet to pay that extra cost. However, what we try to tell them is that if we do not improve from that point of view over the short run, our services will collapse. Cities will have a lot of problems and they won't be able to maintain them, to keep them running, and to invest in them for the future. What are the possible roads ahead of us? Well, we should start thinking about solutions that are adapted to the local reality. Of course, towns and cities need to work on their own management plans and to include in those plans a solution that is adaptable and realistic. Sometimes that means that the landfill must be shut down, or the informal dumpster should be shut down, and to have a proper sanitary landfill to treat their waste. Or sometimes maybe just a simple system will suffice to reuse organic waste, because in some areas in Brazil, organic waste 75% accounts for 75% of urban waste. So we need to come up with simple solutions and not just to roll out and implement this hierarchical principle, thinking about prevention, which sometimes takes many years. It might take very long, and throughout that time, the dumpster will continue to pollute the soil and water and rivers in the city. When speaking about Brazil, we need to think about improving our legal and financial safety and security so that those services can be implemented over the long run. And this is a very current discussion. Communication is essential in order to improve social involvement. If citizens do not adhere to the system, if citizens do not actively participate in the system, any initiative designed by cities will not be successful because, of course, citizens are a key stakeholder in this system for any waste management model to be a success. So, as I said, we need to keep working on specific mechanisms to implement and to invest in infrastructures, but also so that we can help those solutions become more long-term solutions. And there's a daily cost that needs to be paid every day, every week. These units have a cost in order to run and to expand their capabilities. But sometimes we talk about the cost of inertia, of just keeping dumpsters running the way they are right now. And that cost is twice the cost that is needed to resolve this problem. But on top of everything we have said so far, we could speak about circular economy, of rezoning policies, end-of-waste criteria, and smart cities, which are part of our mayor's agendas, but also the agendas of our companies and municipalities, and therefore they should all be properly implemented. Now, for all of this to be feasible, so that we can all obtain proper results, these systems need to be implemented on the basis of partnerships. And that is the 17th goal of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And the whole waste management industry requires those alliances, those partnerships to be in place. Of course, they may be of a very different nature, but there is no possible solution for waste management problems that can be implemented by one single stakeholder, a city, a company, or a provincial government, or a federal government. In Brazil, those partnerships can be implemented through what we call shared responsibility principle. I did mention that at the beginning. That means having manufacturers, importers, distributors, but also sellers, consumers, and the owners of those utility services. They all share part of the responsibility of the whole waste management system. And then, of course, public-private partnerships that are increasing in Brazil. That means sharing risks between the public and the private sector. We're talking about projects that are based on the value for money principle and with a high return on their investment in new sites, which is recovered over the long run. And finally, reverse logistics. This means the need to implement some kind of a product and return system so that they can use those materials in industrial systems. We have reverse logistics for agrochemical products, residues, packaging, batteries, tires, for packaging in general, and also for drugs. What are some of the positive impacts that we consider for the next few years? Well, if we analyze the makeup of those residue materials, organic material accounts for 51.4%, so we can do a lot more to improve that. There's still a huge area for recycling to be used. 31.9%, and then other refuse, 16.7%, where new materials can also be recovered and worked upon. So we're talking about huge volumes. There's still a long way to go, and we should make good use of it. What is part of today's agenda? Well, we need to rethink how we manage our waste and to somehow strike a balance, because we can see on one side what we throw away, what we toss away as waste, and then on the other side, our planet, the planet that we want to improve and get back somehow. That's why in ISWA we will be holding the national conference to be held in Baltimore, and it will be called No Time to Waste. We have no time to keep wasting time discussing about issues that never end, keeping our regular dumpsters open, and using a lot of our resources with no possible return. Thank you so much for your attention. And let me just ask you for a final favor. If possible, please support our ISWA campaign to close the 50 largest dump sites in the world. This campaign is available if you visit our website at ISWA, the ISWA. So just give us your signature in support of this campaign. And by 2030, we hope to be able to shut down these 50 largest dump sites where most of the pollution produced on our planet is located. Thank you so much.
Very much, Carlos. Please God, we can do this soon, close these 50 largest landfills in the world. And now we're going to wind up with Panama, Experience 3, a leader, the Zero Waste Program 2015-2035. The floor is yours, madam. Thank you very much. Good morning to you all, and I'd like to thank Relagres, the organizers, Jaime Agari, the Chileans who are on the northern route. Thank you very much for your excellent company. So, let's see if I can work out how this thing works. All right. The Zero Waste Program in Panama City is a new program, and I'm going to tell you what we're doing and how we're doing it. Let me talk to you first of all about the situation in Panama. It's a metropolitan area of some million inhabitants, while the metropolitan area is virtually twice as big. Ours is a country which has had significant economic growth in the region, some 8%, one of the highest rates in the world, leading to a large amount of consumption and waste of materials, so a lot of waste generation. So it's a Panama of contrast. Very close to us, we have this waste, plastic, in the woodlands, the mangroves, and a lot of waste ends up in the natural ecosystem, leading to problems such as flooding, health, bad smells. It's a rather serious problem that we have in Panama City. This was last year. So let's see if I can make this work. You can see here, all of this area is waste that's come down the river. And you can see this on a video on YouTube, the Seminario River in Panama, and it went viral, this video, and alerted everyone to the serious problem that we've got. Since 2014, we've had a health warning out because the waste is also a problem that generates focuses of infection, mosquitoes. We've got microcephalia, like in Brazil, the Zika virus, sanitary, in inverted commas, landfills, which is a focus of infection in Panama City. We don't do anything with the methane or with the lixiviates, heavy metals, plastics all ends up in the sea, and we all know about that. In terms of human health, we had a huge fire for several days 5 years ago. Just imagine the dioxins that were generated around Panama City. There were whole districts of the town severely affected with problems of allergy, respiratory problems due to this fire. Okay, how much do we produce? Or how much reaches the landfill? 2,000 tons per day, 59,000 tons a month, and it's all mixed. Electronic waste, up until recently we had different loads. The General Secretary is informing now that that does not occur anymore, that it's going to a processing plant, and that's also a problem because they're not ready for it. Tires, hundreds and hundreds of tires a day, polluting everything because there's no kind of sorting or management, and a high percentage of this waste is recyclable and would actually have market value if it were not contaminated. Our waste generation, according to the Inter-American Development Bank, it's 1.2 kilos per inhabitant per day. I don't source or final disposal. If it is final disposal, it could be a bit slanted. Here, the Inter-American Development Bank shows Panama as one of the highest in terms of per capita generation. This is Chile. My Chilean colleagues in this study, which didn't cover all of the cities, we're pretty much on a level there. So the mix of our waste is largely made up by organic waste, then plastic. In this study, which was carried out by JICA, which needs to be updated, it shows plastic at 12%, but I'm sure that's higher now. Glass, which is a problem. We don't have a market for plastic and glass in Panama. Therefore, they're just chucked everywhere. Plastic, let's talk about plastic. How much is coming into Panama? In 2015, this was research done by a consultancy firm employed by the Ministry of the Environment. This year, we're talking about an entry of 143.6 million tons in all different forms, bottles, different forms. which corresponds to 22,622 elephants worth of plastic, or 5,518 40-foot containers. All of that plastic comes into Panama. Where does most of it end up? In the landfill, and a lot of it ends up in the sea. So here, it doesn't reach you, but this is in the Pacific. And you know that there's that huge island of plastic floating around in the Pacific, but also in Panama, on the Caribbean side, there's a lot of waste as well, which maybe reaches you, well, not here because we're in the Mediterranean, but anyway. And this is the forecast. If the trend continues, the amount of plastic reaching Panama will increase up to some 250,000, 250,000 tons in 2025. And we've got to turn this around. Okay, the background to the program, 2008-2009, through the cooperation of the Avina organization. This chap here, Roberto Cavallina, and my foundation, Ancon, and Agua y Juventud, which is another movement. We developed the zero waste strategy, where we involved the local council, the recycling firms, corporations. It was a wonderful experience, and from that we developed the first of our strategic lines for our program. But what happened in 2010? Due to a health crisis, the national government took on by law the waste collection of all of the towns and the management of waste, starting in Panama City. It was never able to go on to the other towns. In 2014, Panama City Council, even though it still didn't have the responsibility for waste management because it was taken away from it in 2010, calls me to work together with the current mayor to coordinate the Waste Zero plan. So it was a special program. In 2015, by law, the responsibility for waste collection and selection was returned to the local authorities, but there was a negotiation between the presidency and the local mayors for the responsibility to go to the local authorities. This is the program 2015-2035, a 20-year horizon, which was done in parallel with another city action plan, which was an Inter-American Development Bank project. And according to this, the first problem that Panama citizens were facing, what they considered to be the greatest problem, is the problem of refuse. And here it speaks of how to tackle the problems of waste. At the same time, and in terms of the same time scale, we see the appearance of the Zero Waste Program. Well, what's interesting here is that it was a municipal agreement that approved this on September the 1st, 2015, and set the legal framework for the program. We also put out a tender for our logo type because it had to be something that the citizens could feel that they had ownership for. And these are the principles which guide us, the principle of the circular economy and the hierarchization that you can see there.
So earlier, and the goal, of course, is to reduce the waste that is sent to this final disposal, as well as a per capita reduction of 10%. Or let's say the waste that is sent to that final disposal. And by 2035, that might sound like quite ambitious. But also a minimum of 50% of recyclable material should also be reused or recycled. It's quite ambitious. I mean, these table, this board that is in charge of this project was the result of a lot of participatory initiatives with universities and companies and citizens and institutions from the central government as well as NGOs. So it was quite a broad participatory process. And then we had some technical meetings as well, where the goals and indicators were defined, were established, and then the outcomes to be obtained. And all of this is the product of that particular seminar. A lot of people involved in finding the right solutions, working on that hierarchy. Those are the 5 items that were selected, quite similar to the strategy we worked on with Ricardo. The team started working. The team, well, I have to say that first I was working on my own, but then there were 2, then 3 people of a technical background, 1 person in charge of awareness raising, and the one for logistics, market economy. I'm in charge of the follow-up and monitoring, as well as the regulatory part of the business. There are 15 people in the team right now, and we keep expanding, especially for educational initiatives. We are working on the main streets as well as in bike lanes and trade fairs, and we try to be very present. An important decision that was made is every time that a container was set up, we had to educate the people and to counsel them, to advise them. That was very important. Everyone said, first, awareness raising. That is a priority. We also worked with schools, offering training to teachers, and then a lot of fairs, more than 70 last year, working with children, young people, their families. We also organized different educational activities in the neighborhood, and also at the city hall. We need to be a reference. We had an internal collection system. We need to keep educating our collaborators. It's quite difficult because there are more than 4,000 people working at the city hall in Panama. There was a warehouse because, of course, whatever we cannot process is kept there. And there have been former governors and other people working there. Of course, the social dimension is extremely important so that we can reach out to the most vulnerable citizens. This is also quite fundamental. It is important in terms of sustainability. We had a public-private partnership set up with the National Brewery and the Ancion Institution, which is the waste management institution that answers to the Department of Health, our mayor, Mr. Valdon, and an NGO representative. So 4 parties. And this was quite helpful. So that we could keep working on sustainability for the whole project. We are about to sign an agreement with the Tocumen Airport and Ecopa Airlines because they are part of this pilot plan, and this is quite important for them. There's a danger in terms of birds flying close to the airport and their waste. Let me just show you where we are located. This is Panama. This is Panama City, and this is our capital district. As you can see, it has the shape of an S, not running north to south. Colombia is on our west, and Colombia to the east. As you can see, this is the Central America, and we're working on 3 districts. This is the first one, a professional district with an initiative in place by the National Brewery, and this is the area of the Panama Canal catchment area. There was a partner already active in the area with a lot of environmental education, with woods and forests that need to be protected, where waste can be quite an obstacle for that canal. Therefore, it was key to include all of these areas to rectify these actions. They're part of the pilot plan and part of the 24 districts that make up the capital district, and with the local representatives that are closest to our citizens.
Here, we find Tocumen, where we could have significant partners, and in fact, they are joining the pilot plan for the private-public cooperation scheme. Then Here we have the recycling plants in Britannia Village. On Google Map, you can put in basura cero, zero waste, and this is where it will take you. Now there are some 6 which should also be on Google Map. We also have our mobile collection points with all of the messages, where we're always trying to create and breed a new awareness of this. Then also in the places that we're working, it's key to work with the citizens, to have a notable presence, even though we're not there 24 hours, to talk to people about the waste, how they should select waste separated at home. And then we also have a door-to-door awareness plan around the districts that we're working in. Then we also hold local meetings where also through an office, which is the Citizen Inquiry Office, we talk to people to ask them what they want and where they want to have their green points, their selective collection points. This is the first thing that we did because, first of all, the people in Relagres village rejected it. They said, yes, I want to recycle, but I don't want the recycling point in front of my house. This is always the not in my backyard problem that everyone faces. So then we held a public inquiry. Then we set up 5 more. Now we've got 6, and they're being managed and run and monitored by the local communities. Because they are under the responsibility of a church, some kind of collective organization, ensuring that they do not become problems, that people, just dump whatever there. And also, the NGO has established a collection point. And this is the NGO collection place, which is part of the public-private cooperation. 2 minutes, okay. We've also got a composting program which we want to take round to the schools, the communities, the companies, to show people how to compost. Also, we are setting up kitchen gardens, vertical kitchen gardens. This is a project that we're working with the penitentiary system, which we work together with the local council. Here, the prisoners, over 600 people, recycling in an awful, filthy, disgusting place. Now it's clean, and they are using the money they've got to help to finance the penitentiary system. Very rustic, very basic. They're doing this, crushing the cans one by one. But it's so successful that the penitentiary system has done the same thing for the women's prison. And here you can see how they're using this to work as a wall for the kitchen gardens, making brooms out of them, composting, growing flowers. It's so beautiful, the place now, with the bottle caps. Look what they're doing with these mosaics. If they work 2 days, the prisoner, they are released 1 day earlier, so it's a great thing for them. For every 2 days' work, a day is taken off of their sentence. So we've fostered the Panama Recycling Chamber. We established its bylaws, set it up, and today it's up and running, and it's a key organization. We're working with a waste exchange where people can exchange waste through a website, which is going to be connected to an American center. We're bringing together restaurants and others that have food waste, food that can be reused. This is a park that we are building. We're working on an internal recycling system. The food waste is a very serious problem. Over 50 tons a day between the 3 public markets that go to a sanitary landfill. It's completely illogical. And we're also working on a recycling plan for the waste food. We're working together with Britain on this, with an organization called RAP, working with food waste here too. From Barcelona County Council, we're receiving technical assistance through the Central University of Catalonia. We're working with them on waste treatment plants. We are certifying companies through a protocol that we developed with the Clean Production, the National Clean Production Center for Panama. And the companies are also able to show their CRP in terms of this. They have to develop a plan, a diagnosis. They have to meet the plan, and then we certify it. And then I don't know if you can help me to run this. The technicians, Mireia, I just wanted you to hear our jingle. We play this at the different fairs. I'm not sure. Great, okay. If you click on the link there, it should run. No, it won't run? Just accept. This was a charitable organization of musicians that wrote our jingle. We can't hear it.
Reutilizar, reciclar, ¡hey! 3 R's que no puedes olvidar, jamás, jamás. Basura cero, redúcela primero, dale un futuro a la ciudad de Panamá.
So that's all from Panama City. Thank you very much. Also, we developed a little TV spot, which has been shown quite a lot. We're doing some more. Could you run this? Could you help me to run this little video clip, please? One day I realized that waste has its own life. And wherever I went, it was there. And what was going on? Waste wasn't dying. And then I discovered the 3 R's. Now I take my own bag when I go shopping and I buy just what I need. I find new uses for things. I don't throw them away. It helps me to save. The old clothes, old toys, I donate them. If at the end of the day I have to chuck things, I selectively do it: glass, plastic, aluminium. Don't let your waste turn into garbage. Reduce, repair, recycle. Just to wind up. Oops. Could I go back to my presentation now, please? So we have indeed learned that public-private alliance means we have to work together, we have to work with people. People are our best partner, and people have to see us out there in the street. We have to be out there with them. This has been a fantastic piece of learning. Then we have to work on the regulations. We have no legal framework. We have different white papers. I am an acting parliamentarian. We have a proposal based on what was done in Brazil, in Costa Rica. We have the proposal, but the government is not interested at the moment. We're working as hard as possible. We want to have local ideas, but we do not have the authority in our local authorities. We can develop, regulations, but it's hard to enforce them. We have institutional challenges of an increasing scale. We have to take on collection, selective collection. It would simplify the program greatly. And that's it. Okay. These are the tons that we've saved through the program. At the moment, it's just symbolic. But of course, financial resources, it's not easy. We've asked the Inter-American Development Bank to help us, but it's hard for them to help us with things like the diagnosis, the characterization, the correctional action. There's a national survey being carried out, but we have to make it more detailed. And I have been talking to Alfredo, and we hope he's going to help us with this, with the statistics, the monitoring, so we know where we stand, to certify the first companies, to expand the pilot plan after 2019, in short. All of these are significant challenges. Now that Alfredo is here, I know there's lots of multilateral banks here, the CAF, the World Bank, our colleagues from the UN. We have to take a further step in Latin America and the Caribbean. We have to follow the path of the circular economy. We need to diversify the system. Sanitary landfills, yes, we are collecting the garbage. We need to selectively dose. I learned from the Catalan agency, with their technical help, that 30 years ago you started here and the director said to us, we made an enormous mistake and I want you to learn from it. And I said, we didn't tackle organic waste from the beginning. We have to do it. We have to remove organic waste from the flow, and that resolves a great problem. Yes, you need processing plant, but we also need to work with the people, as our colleague Carlos said. And so these multilateral agencies also have a role to play in terms of the ministers of economy, presidents. We need experts from all over the world, from Europe, from Asia, to talk to them, because we need to change our approach in Latin America. And if the multilateral banks and the UN don't help us along this road, it becomes harder for us. We can't all come to Europe. You who have the know-how, the knowledge, you have the instruments. Please help us, follow us along the road, help us to find other solutions, not just sanitary landfills and garbage collection. We need to reduce consumption too, and that's very hard to convey to our citizens, but that we have to do. And so with that, I'll say farewell to you, and please forgive me, but I really do feel a great passion for this all. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Alida,
so much, Alida, for your presentation, for your courage, and thank you for this call for action. So this is the end of this block. We would love to have some time for a Q&A. Unfortunately, we are running very late, so if you allow me, we'll move on to the next block and speak about European experiences. Thank you so much.
Dos de las intervenciones que vienen a continuación serán en inglés.
Two of the next speakers will speak in English, so if anyone in the room needs a translation headset, so you can pick them up as you come into the room. Thank you. We'll start in a minute. are running slightly late. We'll do our best to begin while the people are coming into the room. We'll start right away. We just heard three cases, three very interesting experiences from Latin America, from Argentina, Brazil, and Panama. We'll now change gears. We'll come to Europe and listen to three other experiences. They are local experiences, and they are indeed a reference for us in Europe. Flanders, the province of Helsingør in the south of Sweden, and then our case, the Catalan model. Of course, we are lagging behind somewhat in terms of if we compare this to other cases, but we are all doing our best so that we can keep improving. Without further ado, I will now give the floor to Anne van de Putte, who is the project manager of the International Policy Unit of OVAM, which is the waste public agency in Flanders. Anne, you have the floor.
So, buenos dias, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to say it's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for this invitation and for your interest in the Public Waste Agency of Flanders. After a short introduction of our agency, I will show you immediately some results that we obtain, particularly in the field of the municipal solid waste management in Flanders. And during my presentation, I will explain you how we achieve these results over the time and how we are shifting from a waste management towards a material management. But how can I move forward? I think there's a technical problem. Okay, and now? It's blocked.
No. Tenim un altre...
Can somebody help us?
Tenim un problema de bateria del passador.
Two minutes from my presentation.
No, it's a problem of the battery.
Okay. I think my presentation demands too much energy. Which one? Okay. So it's to understand our waste policy. It's first of all, to understand our waste policy, I would like to say some words about Flanders. Flanders is one of the three regions of Belgium, located in the northern part of the country. Flanders is very densely populated, and we have a high degree of industrialization. So you can consider, in fact, Flanders as one big city. Since 1980, in Belgium, each region became full competent for its environmental policy. And in Flanders, the competences on waste management, materials management, and soil management were centralized in one body, the Public Waste Agency of Flanders, that has been established in 1981. Important is that the head of our agency is the Flemish minister responsible for the environment, but the daily management is delegated to a general administrator. So the main task of our agency is, first of all, to prepare the legislation on waste and materials management on behalf of the minister responsible for the environment. And once the legislation is approved by the Flemish government, we implement and supervise the implementation of the legislation on waste and materials management in Flanders. And we have the same task regarding the soil management. Our waste decree of 1981 has recently been revised and reformed in a materials decree. And later on you will understand why we call it not anymore a waste decree, but a materials decree. As I have already said, Flanders is a very densely populated area. We have 6 million inhabitants, spread over 308 municipalities. And in Flanders, the municipalities are grouped in 26 associations of municipalities. This is a corporation structure between different municipalities on a free basis with an average of approximately 250,000 inhabitants. In Belgium, and also in Flanders, the municipalities are legally responsible for the collection and treatment of the municipal waste produced within their territory. And the municipalities are also the competent authorities for levying taxes on the collection and processing of the municipal solid waste. And these two basic principles, together with the fact that Flanders is a densely populated area, create the framework within which the Flemish waste policy is developed and continues to evolve. This is very important to understand our waste policy. I'm always proud when I can show you this chart, because on this chart you can follow the significant growth of the separate collection of the municipal solid waste at source from 1990 until 2015. And at the same time, you can follow the decrease of the residual waste over the same period. So currently, thanks to the efforts of the local authorities, the municipalities, the citizens, we collect 70% of the municipal solid waste source separated in order to be reused, recycled or composted. 30% is collected as residual waste in order to and of which 27 is incinerated in incinerators, all equipped with energy recovery and with the most advanced flue gas cleaning system, because we live in a densely populated area and nobody wants an incinerator in his neighborhood. From this chart, we can also see that since 1997, we collect more waste separately at source compared to the residual waste. And since 1997, we have also a landfill ban for municipal solid waste. The less than 1% that is mentioned here is really waste that cannot be recycled or incinerated. So, also important is that in our policy, the aim is to keep the residual waste to a quantity as small as possible. And the target in our policy is 150 kilograms per inhabitant per year. So you can see also that we achieve already this target since the last 10 years. So for us, landfilling becomes more and more a history. This diagram gives you an overview of the waste that is collected separately in order to be reused, recycled and composted. And as you can see, the bio-waste, the kitchen waste, the garden waste, the biodegradable household waste represent 32% of the waste that is collected separately at source. And the aim is to divert the bio-waste from the landfill site to transport it to composting facilities in order to be processed and to become good quality compost in accordance to our standards. So the reason that we achieve these very good results is that we regulate on a consistent way our waste management in accordance with the well-known hierarchy of waste management operation. We all know that waste prevention and the prevention of the harmfulness of waste is the most important environmental solution, followed by reuse, recycling and composting of the waste materials. The third option is the incineration of waste with energy recovery and, once again, under stringent sanitary conditions because we live in a very densely populated area. And the last and lowest option in our waste policy is the final disposal of waste on the landfill site. So these four options create the basis for a sustainable waste management system and are the key drivers for resource efficiency. And waste management is everybody's business, from the smallest household to the biggest company. And to realize and to steer the waste management options from the lowest landfilling, the most easiest way from landfilling to the most difficult step, waste prevention, we use in Flanders a whole range of policy instruments. So we have legal-based instruments as legislation. We have incineration and landfill bans. I have already mentioned that we have a ban for the municipal solid waste. We implement the extended producer responsibility. We have mandatory collection schemes for the municipalities. We use also market-based instruments as levies. We have taxes on landfilling and incineration. We implement the pay-as-you-throw system. I will come back later on in my presentation on the interest of the pay-as-you-throw system. And we support also the municipalities financially with their infrastructure necessary for the separate collection at source for the municipal solid waste. We use also informed-based instruments as education and programs, public awareness and information programs and campaigns. So the challenge is to find out the most appropriate mix of policy instruments in order to achieve your targets. It's not the number of instruments that is very important, it's your smart combination that is important. This is an important diagram because on this diagram you can see the cost, the gate fee for landfilling and incineration together with the levies for landfilling and incineration, the dark bar. And as you can see, the levies for landfilling is much higher than the levies for the incineration of waste in order to discourage landfilling. And a part of the incomes generated by these levies flew back to the municipalities to support them financially with the infrastructure necessary for the separate collection at source of the municipal solid waste. So, in the beginning, before the start of our agency, before 1981, citizens throw the waste all together in one bag, and the waste collected was transported to the landfill sites and to the existing incinerators. At that time, I can say you, landfilling was the most dominant way for waste disposal and mostly for free. So there was no structured waste management at all. So we started by creating order out of chaos, by closing approximately by closing all the illegal dump sites. It was approximately 90% of the landfill sites that were closed, by redeveloping more or less appropriate landfill sites, by making at that time the maximal use of the existing incineration capacity, and last but not least, by giving the starting signal for the separate collection at source of the municipal solid waste by creating a network of recycling yards. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I will make a big jump. I will make a jump of approximately 20 years, but this jump has been made step by step. So nowadays, for the separate collection at source in Flanders, we have two systems simultaneous in operation. We have the door-to-door collection of the residual waste, the door-to-door collection of the biodegradable waste, of the paper and cardboard, and of the light fraction, the packaging waste. We call it the PMD, plastic bottles and flasks, metal cans and drink cartons. At the same time, we have our bring sites in operation. You can call it also civic community centers. You can call it recycling yards. It's all different names for the same, where people can bring on fixed day, fixed hours, under the supervision of a recycling yard keeper, recyclable materials. People can also bring other waste streams, as the small hazardous household waste, in order to be sure that these waste streams will be treated on an environmental sound way. We have a network of bottle banks where people can dispose of container glass separated in clear glass and in colored glass. And in Flanders, we promote very, very strongly the home composting. And we create also a network of reuse centers where people can bring reusable goods for free in order to be refreshed, repaired, and refurbished and resold at a low price. And this picture results in the 70% of the waste that is collected separately in order to be reused, recycled, or composted. I told you that we promote very strongly the home composting, and and to stimulate the citizen to start with the home composting, we worked out. Sorry, I'm a little bit too fast. So we have at the moment a network of 337 recycling yards in operation. It means approximately 1 per 18,000 inhabitants, and more than 50% of the recyclable materials is collected at the recycling yard with a high purity level. And this purity level is very important because the market for recyclable materials is an international market, and how better the recyclables are, how better the price you will receive on the market. So we consider more and more waste as a raw material and not longer as a waste material in order to close the material loop. I told you already, we promote indeed very strongly the home composting, and to stimulate citizens to start and to cooperate in the home composting, we worked out a lot of educational materials as leaflets and posters. But next to this promotion strategy, home composting requires also technical support. And for this technical support, we create a network of compost masters. Compost masters are volunteers that help and instruct the citizen with how to start with the home composting, with the functioning of the compost bin, and how to make good quality compost. I can tell you that more than 60% of the Flemish household compost their bio-waste in their backyard. So we have door-to-door collection. We run several recycling yards. This has, of course, a cost. And how do municipalities finance in Flanders their waste services towards the citizen? They do it by imposing yearly a fixed tax and by imposing a fixed tax and a tax for each residual waste bag the citizen set out. By imposing a tax, a cash tax for the collection of the packaging waste, the light fraction, a cash tax by means of a sticker that you stick on your container every year for the door-to-door collection of the biodegradable biodegradable household waste. The access to the recycling yard is for free. For recyclable materials, the access to the bottle bank is also for free, and the collection of paper and cardboard is also for free. So a combination of a fixed tax with a cash tax, first of all, reduce the residual waste, because how better you sort your waste, how less residual waste you will produce. It gives a boost to the separate collection. It makes the citizen more and more aware of the real cost for the collection and treatment of the waste. And last but not least, it applies the polluter pays principle. But be aware when you want to introduce the pay-as-you-throw system in your municipality, be aware of the negative effects as illegal dumping, burning of the waste in the backyard, and littering. So when you want to introduce it, you need to introduce it very, very, very slowly. As already mentioned in previous presentation, people has to participate in the separate collection. So the commitment of the citizen in the participation of this new system is very important. So the separate collection can only work if the citizens are well informed about the new collection system and if they are aware of the new system. And this is a picture of our famous waste collection calendar that mentioned on which day which waste fraction will be collected door to door. It's very handy. It hangs mostly in the kitchen or in the garage of each household. Recently, we developed also an app for the smartphone that gives you the signal the day before about which waste fraction you need to set out tomorrow. Children are a very important target group. They are sensitive for nature and environment. They educate their parents and grandparents in their eco-friendly attitude. So we worked also out a lot of educational materials for schools. So if we achieve these very good results, 70% of our waste management, 70% of our municipal solid waste is collected at source separately. This is mainly due to the fact that the municipalities cooperate together in their fight against the waste amount. So we recommend very strongly the cooperation between municipalities. Municipalities, or the Association of Municipalities, is a perfect level to set up a better waste management. They are close to their citizens and they are best placed to set up a convenient, user-friendly and adequate collection system. Very important is that the municipalities or Association of Municipalities keep control over the collection and treatment of the municipal solid waste and keep control also over the cost for the collection and treatment of the municipal waste. Municipalities and Association of Municipalities play a key role in the implementation of the national, regional or local management plan, and they can be front runners in setting up a better waste management system. So I think you could see that we already have taken a big first step, but we are still wasting too many raw materials. And the environmental pressure caused by the use of these raw materials is definitely too high. So there are several urgent reasons to move forward, to close the material loop, and to shift the focus of our waste management towards a circular economy approach. So in our vision, waste management is working on each step of the hierarchy of waste management operations, and this on an integrated and planned way, is looking for a good mix of policy instruments, and it's not the number of instruments that is important, but the combination, and is working, and the previous speaker has also said it, is working on the full commitment of all your stakeholders. Is working on the commitment of the citizen, the service providers, and the local authorities. And is also working on a continuous dialogue with all your stakeholders. I can tell you that without this commitment and without this dialogue in Flanders, we should never achieve these good results. So don't be afraid of waste management, because waste management contributes to resource conservation, creates definitely business opportunities and employment, improve the environment, and stimulates the innovation. Multas gracias. A manual about school composting, I have a manual about home composting, and how to set up a reuse center. For those who want this manual, please, I will not take them back to Brussels.
Sí. Dile que, pasa. Si le queréis pedir ejemplares de este manual.
Copies of this manual, and I'm sure would be delighted to provide you with them. Now we're going on to the next speaker, Mr. Kim Olsen. Kim is the manager of NSR Helsingborg, which is an intermunicipal public company of the province of Iskania, which is in the south of Sweden, touching on Denmark. So the floor is yours, sir.
Thanks for inviting me here to Barcelona and some better weather than the Chilenos had when they visited Copenhagen and Helsingborg last week. I will stay here. In my presentation, I won't have any songs. I won't have any diagrams. I won't have any gorillas. I have a cow. But I want to tell a story. And I have a vision that I want you to share and to be the ones who fulfill the vision of a society that takes the step from a linear economy to a circular economy. I thought it was more Portuguese or Brazilians here, so I translated into Portuguese, but Mr. Silva, for you. And if the translation is wrong, then we can blame Google Translator. So, like London, I come from a part close to Copenhagen. We call it Grande Copenhagen. It's the company where I'm CEO. It's, you can say, 1/10 of the area with 300,000 inhabitants, and the owner are 6 municipalities. We do about 5 million services every year. And last year we were awarded as the best waste management in Sweden. And some weeks ago we got a much more interesting prize. We got prized in Las Vegas for a documentary about a sustainable society and waste management. And it was a TV production team from Hong Kong who went to our area to find out how do you think and what do you do and we got awarded in the category Human Concern. I said Greater Copenhagen, and usually then you define yourself in a physical way. Yeah, we live here, 3 million inhabitants and so on, but we want to do it different. It's a way to live. It's the Scandinavian spirit that Greater Copenhagen stands for. It's a society where you have a sustainability, where you have the creativity, where you have the equality, trust, and we do it together. And one small a story about this, how we manifest this, is do everyone know what Bluetooth is? Do you use it? Bluetooth, do you know where the name came from? Why Bluetooth? Actually, the name comes from the Vikings. But you know, Bluetooth, it's not 1,000 years old. It was the story about the tribe leader of the Vikings. Once a year, he found out that, okay, we go all over the Europe and some parts in Asia, and then we look at our interests and bring home some raw material. But the problem is that we fight each other. Isn't it better that let's have a union where we make the strategic choices and divide the market, and then we do this together. It will be more efficient. So once a year they had this meeting. So they dropped the weapons outside, and they had a lot of beer, and they found out really good strategies, and then they went out of this party, and then they started to kill each other again. With the Bluetooth story, the companies with the IT sector, information technology sector, they were in need to have something that a wireless transformation without being connected to IBM or whatever, which company that produced the stuff. So they settled in Lund, one area of the Greater Copenhagen, and they said, yeah, let's get together to solve this problem. So all the companies went there, dropped the weapons, locked the door. 2 days after, they solved the problem. And this new technology had to have a name. So they choose, or one of the guys who participate, he said, yeah, but this is similar to one book I have read about a tribe leader, Mr. Bluetooth. So let's call the technology Bluetooth. And this story explains the way we try to act with the Scandinavian spirit. Okay, we are not afraid of competing, but it's better to solve the common problem together and then compete, than start to compete without having the solution in front of us. The number we have, the key performance indicators shows that 1% of our waste goes to landfill, 75% is recycled, 24% then waste to energy, and this all to the cost of 50 euros per person a year. And that means that we have to add some more coffee cups, cups of coffee. But it's not that many, I think 5 or 6 a year. So in my opinion, this is not about the economy. It's about resource efficiency. And the resource efficiency could easily be copied by the cow. Here's our, you mentioned a lot of the food waste, how we do. And we have just copied the nature with the biogas plant that everyone talks about. And of course, the biogas plant that generates the energy is important. But the most important with the biogas plant is the recirculation of the nitrification. So with this model, we don't need to buy any fuel, diesel or whatever, for our transportations, for collecting and transport it for recycling. So the waste eliminates the cost for the transportation cost. So now when we come to this, we have these numbers and so on. Then it's easy to sit back and think, okay, now we made it. But the question is, what did we make? And we found out we made it possible to live in a linear economy. Because we were the one, in the end, who solved all the problems so that the society could keep on living linear. Because we took care of everything in the end. So it was a bit scary to realize that the problem wasn't the others. The problem was us. We had invested a lot of money, we have done all these things that locked us in a situation that we were dependent on receiving waste, and a lot of waste. So this is about 7-8 years ago. The owners, they said, yeah, but how can you run this business? You need to meet the targets that we have to reduce the amount of waste, but that's at the same time, the fundamental business model of the company was based on the more waste we received, the more money we earned. Do you recognize that? I think all waste management companies in the world, or recycling companies in the world, their business idea is based on more waste. So I think this is, we are part of the problem. But the good news, we are part of the solution as well. Because if we have the energy and the visions to redefine ourselves and use our knowledge to think ahead instead of in a reactive way, our competences in this sector worldwide are crucial to get the right solutions from the beginning. What we decided to do, I will present now. But first of all, I want to say that it wasn't an easy trip to do this, because the economic muscles of the linear society or businesses, they have much, much more money than we have. And we have been to court, I think it's 28 times, to European court, to the national court, and so on. But we have 28-0 in gain for the circular economy until now. So we have challenged the whole system, and sometimes you reflect and think what I'm doing, but I have patient owners who trust in the way to go from the linear system to the circular. So I had some friends from the beginning, because in the area where I work, most of the companies are in one way or another connected to recycling. 24,000 employees in the sector, and leader in recycling of water, recycling of glass, and so on. So we had a business that understood that something had to be done. We had two extraordinary examples of industrial symbiosis, Kalundborg and Helsingborg, where it's about 30 different companies in each symbiosis connected with each other, where the waste from one company is the resource for another. And then we had a tradition of biofertilization. If the industrial symbiosis had lived for 50 years, the biofertilization had been used for 25 years at the fields. We have strong universities, University of Lund, the Tekniska Universitet, and then we got a worldwide investment for the future materials called ESS. It's where we develop what's becoming waste maybe in 50 years. And to not have waste, we have to be a part of that process to find the new materials. And last but not least, it's the ambitions of the political sector. They target us to reduce the amount of waste, including the recycling, with 50% from 2010 to 2020. And my employees said, Kim, you're crazy to accept that. But then I said, yeah, but it's not we who are going to do this. It's us together. It's the inhabitants, it's the companies, it's the universities, and it's the politicians. So what we put together, we set a name to call this idea of a new era, Vera Park. It's where the negocios, where the universities, and where the circles of ecologically go together. And now we have special knowledge in prevention of waste, source separation, education, logistics. Usually this business, it's not really good in logistics. We think we are, but then when we reflect on it, I got amazed last year. If you imagine, okay, one part of the city where you're working, about 60 roads, and then you imagine the amount of waste or collection points, and then if you try to calculate how many ways is it possible to collect this waste, 60 roads, like a small area, it equals the number of atoms in the university that you can collect this waste. And often we work not really with digital, we use paper and pen. Now we have done this for 50 years, we do it the same way. But I say, in this part, it's so much money to collect to make it more efficient. Biogas for the transports, the leak water, We have the exploration of landfills. Some call it landfill mining, and then waste to energy. So what we are really not thinking of selling things. We are more networking, sharing knowledge. And during these 10 years, as I said, when we need to use our competences together within Vera Park to think ahead, to reach our targets, I now will present some of the results. As we have heard, one of the problems why we won't reach the 100% of recycling, we target 70, 75. Everyone knows it. It's plastic. And you can say, yeah, we can collect it. That's good, but we can't recycle it, so it's no use in that. So we have to think ahead. We have to think we need something with a fantastic function of plastic, but we need something that's degradable, something that's not fossil, something that could be treated in another way. So together with the European Union, a company called Gaia and Municipal of Båstad, we have taken the steps to develop a new material that can replace the petroleum and replace the recycling of plastic. We can collect it in the waste bin for the green waste. Another one is, we have heard it, food waste. So then we thought, okay, all the apartments, they have to go to somewhere else to locate their waste, to get rid of the waste. So what we found out, we need it to be easier to get rid of the food waste within the apartment. And then we redefined the old technology of using the waste, where you smash it in the kitchen. So we have a separate system. So all the apartments here in this new built area, they have 3 pipes out, where we just use water for the tap, not for the toilets and not for the waste. And with this idea, we recirculate the nutrifications more efficiently than just collect it and make biogas. With the biogas, we needed to make the economy better. Then we needed to enter into the transport sector, and as the buses now try to move on to electricity, we found a new segment. It's the long-distance transporters. So we have liquid biogas, which runs the fleet of all the trucks in this region. We have taken steps to replace the fossil diesel for the ferries. So they will all, in the future, they will run partly on liquid natural gas and partly on liquid biogas. And we have taken steps to redefine the whole collection of waste. Today we have a production-orientated system. They come each day or every second day or every week. In the future, we just go as the aim is to reduce the amount of waste. So we can't just run the business like we did before. We have to collect the waste when it's full of waste, not empty bins. And just then implement the new technology. And then we have some other initiatives with PFOS, you probably know, in the leak water, and recycling of wood with a glue that's sustainable. Biocarbon will be extremely interesting, especially for, now we haven't talked a lot about the waste that contaminated soil, but biocoal is efficient to bind the contamination at the location instead of dig it up and transport it to a landfill. And ashes as well. But the most important, it's to put with the eyes of the consumer, which we now define as the user, as we live in a circular economy. There's no consumption, it's just that you use things. And we want to go together with our users to make it possible for them to live in a sustainable society where you take responsibility both for you when you use a product, but as well what happened before and what happened afterwards. So the concept of consumption is much, much wider and contains the using present, what happened before and what will happen afterwards. And this knowledge, it's a worldwide knowledge, and I want all of you to be part of this movement that we stop the consumption and start using the material in a resource efficient way. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Very much. In effect, there were no songs or gorillas, but there was a good story about the circular economy. We're going to end up with Josep Maria Tost. He's the director of the Catalan Waste Agency, and he's going to talk to us about what's happened over the last few years. The floor is yours, sir. Thank you. Good morning to you. I've got no gorillas. First of all, our waste management in Catalonia, the history. Okay, as you know, we're a small country in the Spanish state, and we have an organization like VAM in Flanders. We are responsible for the collection and processing of waste. We are responsible to the ministry, and we do the planning, coordination, and organize the infrastructure. Our reality is a midpoint between the current situation in Latin America and the situation in the most advanced countries in Europe. You know, the Spanish state became a member of the European Union in '86. The policies in Spain were a lot behind those of the rest of Europe, and the environmental policy started in Spain at the end of the '80s, beginning of the '90s, where we attempted to implement European legislation. But what we're talking about here is a change of habits and of citizen awareness, but most particularly awareness of the political world and policies. The generation of the laws, where budgets are allocated, and where social changes are sought. We changed a lot as a country. As I say, in 1984, our level of recycling was 1.4% of the waste we generated. Today, we're around 38-40%. For some years now, we've been at a bit of a standstill because there's been a political change. But what's very important is that in less than 20 years, we've achieved this kind of level. And what was the situation in Spain at the end of the '80s, beginning of the '90s? We had 2,000 landfills, 1,000 towns and 2,000 landfills. And, the kind that we saw here, burning, generating lixiviates, problems with rats, rodents, health problems. But there was a serious change in political awareness at the time. The first government, Spain, has its own region. Catalonia has its own regional government. And we had two serious problems of public health. One was the problem with wastewater, and the other was waste management. And a political option was taken to set up two powerful organizations that didn't exist. One was the Waste Council to deal with this, and they were very powerful. There was the Act of 83 in Catalonia, which is one of the first in Europe, and the 93 Act was very advanced in terms of European policy. So this was the situation. What was key? Political unity on the subject. It's clear that with waste and water, we don't have to fight between political parties, and we don't have to disorient the citizen, and the will of the Catalan government to devote public resources, debt, to finance infrastructure and to help the municipalities that are the owners of the waste to make changes. So, two very important factors. We've got the very important laws, which if they're not complied to, they're no use. I mean, you need money to support them. Without support, financial support, you can't do anything. So my government here in Catalonia invested €1 billion in financing local agencies and infrastructure to convert those 2,000 landfills in 25 sanitary landfills and provide basic infrastructure for our nation, and to set up the Catalan Waste Agency, which supports the local authorities. 2,000 workers, which is key to support these changes in habits. That's the key. Instruments, very simple. A good law, which is complied to. That's it. It's enforced and adapted to our situation. The Catalan Waste Agency, we form part of Europe, but there's 2,000 kilometers from the Danish region or Flanders to here. 2,000 physical kilometers, cultural kilometers, differences in eating habits. We're a small country with 6.5 million citizens, and so we're kind of part of the old Europe. So the solution is not to literally copy. One of the great mistakes we made in the past, we went to the north of Europe to look at things. We have to adapt them to our situation, not copy them. So we need to acquire know-how and adapt it to our situation, to take the essence and adapt it. Programs, goals, without data, without information, how can you plan? With 1,000 city halls, how can I plan? So we require a kind of 5-year plan, but that has to be fed with data. What kind of waste do we generate in Catalonia? Where is it generated? What is the amount of it? All of that is key, but without planning and goals, people do nothing. If you don't have targets for them, challenges, people don't do anything. You cannot just make generic laws. Yeah, we'll do this, we'll foster that. No, that doesn't work. So a good law, good planning, useful planning. Obviously, as a government, we cannot leave these 1,000 municipalities on their own. So we need to plan goals, but we also need to plan the infrastructure. We've been doing that for 20 years because in Catalonia, the law is that waste treatment is financed by the government. So to close these landfills, we finance the construction of sanitary landfills, waste treatment processing plants, selection plants, more than 500 green points around Catalonia. So we don't just do the top bit, we also finance it. And then fiscal aspects. We are a very Mediterranean land. We work basically on the carrot and stick basis with positive and negative reinforcement. So, Why don't we drive at 170 kilometers an hour on our highways? We used to do it. Why not now? Because there are these machines there that take a picture of our car and they will fine us €600 and take 6 points off of our driving license. Why aren't we smoking here? 20 years ago in a conference like this, everyone would be smoking. So if we were to smoke here, the local police would come along and would fine us. So the question is environmental fiscality, to penalize bad practices and to reward good practices. Pay for throwing. This is what Obama's government said. Pay for generation. Here in Catalonia, those that pollute pay. The Catalan industry is very aware of that. We've made an effort to recycle waste here, but not the citizen. So there's a large part of the citizens that do recycle because of their ethics, because that's what they believe in, because that's what they want to do. But there is a part of the population that couldn't care less. What concerns us are the young people between 20 and 35, 40 years old. The 40-year-olds, we're also young, aren't we? So how do we change this? Economic support. That's the key. So the model is basically by law, the city halls. I'm a mayor. We must have to separate the different fractions, packages, glass, organic, and paper and cardboard, and then the remaining fraction. Okay? Which is, we approximately recycle some 38 point something percent of our waste. 20% is incinerated, and 40% of it goes to sanitary landfills. That's the way things stand today. Why is it important to recycle? The 3 R's of the 90s. Here in Catalonia, 4 to 6% of CO2 emissions come from waste. To take a kilo of cardboard and paper to a landfill generates some 3 kilo equivalent of CO2. But if we recycle it, we save it. A kilo of organic fraction taken to a landfill generates 1.1 kilos of CO2 equivalent. On the other hand, if we recycle it, sorry. So, glass and metals obviously don't have a CO2 impact on a landfill, but for each kilo of glass we recycle, we save 200 kilos of CO2, and metals 2,000. From each kilo of metal, 2.4 kilos. Plastic. In a landfill, it won't cause emission, but energy is used. So when we tell people that they need to recycle, it's also for a clear environmental reason. And, we're seeing a change of mindset. In the Western world, we produced in the same way, linearly. You take raw material, you process them, use them, and chuck them. And we've been consuming in the same way for 40 years, which is a complete waste of resources, particularly after the Second World War. But we've come to the end of this. Why? Because for 100 years ago, when my grandfather was born in 1903, how many inhabitants were there in the world? 2 billion. When my father was born in 42, it was 2.4 billion. When I was born in 71, just a few years ago, there were 4.5 billion of us. Today, we share planet Earth with 7 billion people. In 2050, there'll be between 9 and 10 billion people. I think, we still haven't found an alternative planet, so we change our way of producing and consuming. I repeat, we cannot continue with the same model of production as we had 200 years ago. We need to change. There is no doubt about it. So the circular economy is not, please, forgive me, but it's not some sort of crap that Brussels has dreamed up to screw us all. No, we are faced with a change of mindset. We have to change. We either change or that's it, finished. As Hawkins says, in 100 years' time, otherwise we'll have to abandon the planet. And that's why all of us, we have to engage in a circular economy. It's all changed. We have a new paradigm which has started in the 21st century. We need to be aware of it. We need to believe it individually and collectively. We cannot waste more resources. We need to recycle, not just to bug each other. We need to, speaking clearly, we mayors don't go out, sort of listening to our citizens saying, no, we have to recycle more. No. Recycling doesn't create votes. We'd rather make a library, a cycle lane. That's what gains us votes. But to change waste management, who cares about that? So we need a political, institutional, and technical conviction. We need to change models. So we're talking about things that 10 years ago people would never have dreamed of. A shared economy. We need a bartering economy. It sounds a very hippie thing. How many of us haven't been away and rented a house that we've shared with others, or rented a car by ours? That's what we do now. Now a car isn't something you own like we used to do. Now you can share a car. These concepts are here to stay. The circular economy is an old concept, 30 years old, but the Dutch carpet company invented the company. They used to produce millions of square kilometers of carpet for trade fairs, and they saw that it was a terrible waste. They started recycling the carpet, and what they do now is they rent the carpet out instead of selling it. So what we need is a new mentality, to pay to use, not to possess. Composting. Plants on our terraces, in our gardens. In Catalonia, 35% of our waste is organic. So, we need to repair things, we need to assemble things, or, we'll also be using 3D printers for many things soon. So we need to be clear, as a society, as a small country of 7 million inhabitants, we have to learn to manage things in different ways, waste as little as possible. We're a small, very industrialized country. We became industrialized by a miracle. We started working with wood and cotton. We need to optimize because the world is growing and changing and everyone has the right to consume. But, can the Western world say to Latin America, no, please don't grow, you're using up all our resources? Or do we say that to China? No, we cannot do that, so we need to optimize what we generate. As an economy, we generate little and we have a lot of demand for raw materials, but we have a great potential for recycling. And this is the reality as things stand. From the periodic table, we recycle very little. We need to develop technology to use far more of it, or reuse far more of it. We recycle copper, steel, aluminium, but we need to create technology to recycle the rest. So, therefore, today, our waste is a source of resources, of employment. Here in Catalonia in 1994, there were 23 waste managers that were legalized. Today, we have 1,000 companies, a bit like the Danish example. They provide 20,000 jobs, 10% of the GDP, some $14 billion. So it's a great opportunity. As an administration, what do we need to do? We need to foster these scenarios, help the private sector to change mindset, that we, handle resources, we do not consume them. So we have a resource and waste plan until 2020. So as a government, what do? We foster reuse. We create markets. There's no market for recycled goods. We need to promote it and create a market, a demand for it. The question of repair, selective collection, it's not a burden on the citizen. It's an act of civility to have an exchange of products. as a government, the question of fiscal aspects, to penalize landfills, to promote recycling. The question of cost is vital. You've seen it already. And it's a very important issue on a political level. To apply technology or processes, all of that has a cost. It's not the same to use an ordinary landfill as to use a sanitary landfill. Or to co-generate electricity. I come from a town of 1,200 inhabitants. When I became mayor, my neighbors paid €18 a year for waste management. Today they pay 140. Is that expensive or cheap? From 18 to 140? Expensive. In 95, what did we do? We drove a truck around, picked up the waste, dumped what the truck had into an old granite quarry. And then when it was too full, we set fire to it. That's what we did. In the summer evenings, you would see columns of smoke rising. I mean, it looked like, they were smoke signals being sent out by Sioux Indians. Today, the €140, what does it do? It pays for a composting plant, a methane plant, and we have a sanitary landfill. Is it expensive or cheap? We have to make an awareness in our society that we're heading to a different form of economy, which is going to mean that the savings we make today could be costs for the future. We have to pay our own costs. Politically, we cannot afford low garbage taxes, polluting rivers, promoting disease for future generations. No, we need to make a significant effort in terms of political education. We need to achieve a consensus. Economic support is important, eco-design, awareness. We have to do things in a different way. So when we bring a product on to the market, we have to think about dismantling it at the end of its useful life. When we buy a car, a TV, we have to see that we can reuse it to the maximum. That's very important. We have to avoid mixes of plastics. Plastic is not going to disappear, but we have to change mindset with it. We need to change the way we produce plastic. Plastic is reusable, so we can't step back. We can't get rid of plastic. Bioplastics is another question. And we need to compost organic waste. The fiscal aspect is key. In Belgium, in Denmark or Sweden, they recycle more than in Catalonia. It's not because they're taller, more blonde or more good-looking than we are. No, not just because of that, but because of this. Denmark established in 1987 the first landfill tax. Well, in Catalonia, in Panama, in Brazil, Chile, Argentina, it was cheaper to use a sanitary landfill. Who's going to recycle if it's so cheap? Shit, nobody. Nobody. So we need to penalize landfills. That's it. As simple as that. That's not very populous. Catalonia is the only part of Spain that taxes landfills. So to go to Belgium, in Belgium, it will cost you €150 to use a landfill. In Catalonia, it's a very important thing. So in 2011, we carried out a cost analysis. The average cost of a landfill in Catalonia, €37. Biogas plants cost €72. Incinerator, 50. If I ask a mayor or mayoress, where do you want to take your waste? Where are you going to take it? To the sanitary landfill, of course you are. So the key, there's just one. Increase and increase and increase the cost of it. Because what's logical is for us to divert resources to recycling. I repeat, that is the key. carrot and stick. These are the recycling costs of different countries in Europe, and so the higher the cost of a landfill, the more recycling is done. Not stupid, is it? So that's the key. So we're talking about 40% recycling in Catalonia, and we want to get to European levels. It's a need. We need to increase the cost of landfills, and that's it. It's as simple as that. Here we can see how things have changed. The level in Catalonia, we can see here the first law, and the separation of the organic fraction, which is key, which is 35% of the waste. So how do we encourage our town halls to separate bio-waste? With law, it's key to give them time periods to change. But what's most important, and where we see most action, is when it is taxed. When it becomes cheaper to recycle the organic fraction than to dump it. Not a miracle. You know, there's no lauders here. So how do we apply this tax? By consensus, an agreement between the city halls of Catalonia and Catalan government. We pay for dumping, the landfills collect this money, and what do we do with this money? 96% goes back to our municipalities. It doesn't go to the treasury of the Catalan government. It's reinvested. How? Paying for the cost of the separation and recycling of the organic fraction and paying for the infrastructure needed. That's what's key. This is our current model. The fee is €30 per ton of stuff that goes to the landfill, and the most return pays for the collection of bio-waste. There's a fixed amount for composting, and then a variable amount according to the purity, that is the quality of the organic fraction collected. And the key is what you can see here at the top. To increase the cost of landfills. A few years ago, it was pretty slow, but now it's it's €30 per ton, and that's a mover. So 36 of that is returned to city halls, to local councils. That's what we need to do. It's key to return it to the local authorities. This took us years to negotiate. This was by consensus. How do we move our councils to do it? How do we get them to develop plans for prevention, to promote recycling, to change to more efficient systems? How do we do it? Door-to-door awareness campaigns. You know, we say that, okay, we're going to increase the tax on landfills by €5. Obviously, that's where you make a difference. And the other is a question of education. This is the cost to a family for a day in Barcelona. This was the 2 cups of coffee in Brazil. A family of 4. This is the cost per day of water, €1.1. Electricity, 3.1. Natural gas, 2.2. Waste, 60 cents. If Barcelona City Council increases waste tax 60%, we're going to have a revolution. Water, electricity, gas, telephone, if they go up, nothing happens. And this is per year in Barcelona, euros per family. So it's clear that what we need to do is to relativize costs and inform our citizens. I'm going to skip this, as you've got the copy of the presentations. Carlos's team will. This one is important. Who pays for the management of waste? The important thing is tax. It is the citizen that has to pay. There were problems in Spain in the past and in some of the Latin American countries. The citizens don't pay the cost. If you don't feel responsibility, you don't change, and it requires clear national legislation for everybody to pay. Otherwise, it's very hard to implement innovation, changes of model, of mindset. Without money, it's impossible. And we have to pay for production. That's the key. That is the key. How do I break through this 40% in Catalonia? For people to pay carrot and stick. If people recycle, they pay less taxes. Today, we all pay the same. We're developing a new law over the coming years in Catalonia to promote the circular economy and, above all, to implement pay per production. 3 experiences here in Catalonia, which are of interest, but this needs to spread if we want to break through this 40% barrier. There is a way of doing it. We've got grants, subsidies, which are modest because of the crisis, but to help change local models, the collection of organic waste, and to help industry adapt to a circular economy. That's important. Small economic supports for that, and obviously with our national project for eco-design, which is essential to encourage companies, corporations, people. For example, with fast food, we promote a lot of studies, look around Europe, the question of industrial symbiosis, which is cooperation between the industrial world and agencies such as ours in terms of the use of raw materials, byproducts. In 1993, we've got the creator of this here, which is a virtual exchange space of more than 3,000 companies that exchange waste as resources. And this allows us to avoid some 300,000 tons of industrial waste going to landfills. And lastly, what we need to do is to have a market for recycled products, a procurement program. So we need to promote recycled things when we need to change tires of the public fleet. 20% of them have to be recycled, retreaded. When we are making a government agreement, all of the public-private organizations in Catalonia, by law, at least 5% of the arids that are used for cement have to be recycled, at least 5%. If we do not generate a public market, what's going to happen? How can we expect the private sector to do it? So we have to create the market. Strategy of innovative public procurement. The more we recycle, the greater the efficiency, and we have to recycle more. Not to bug anybody, but because it's a real need. What we don't want to do is to hurt the future generations, and we need the technology to do it. Obviously, we need to educate our citizens, the politicians, that there is a cost. It requires a significant change in habits, and if we don't do that, things are going to end up badly. We need a significant change in mindset. This is not a question of aesthetics. It's a question of changing the social, economic model to guarantee the future for the generations to come. That's all. Thank you very much, and I remain at your disposal to answer any questions you may have. We're running 15 minutes late. We're going to go straight on to the closing of the Congress. Please, could we ask our final speakers to take the podium? Prior to going on to the closing session, just a bit of housekeeping. Let me remind you of a couple of things. At 2:30, the coach will leave from the front of the campus here to take you to the integrated waste valorization center of the Maresme. We'll have a bit of lunch there, and then we'll visit the plant. And for the Relagres members, at 9, the coach will leave from the door of the Ateneo Hotel to take you on the visit to the metropolitan area of Barcelona, to some of their facilities, and we'll have a reception there as well. So, having said that, that's the program for tomorrow, Wednesday, June the 14th. with regard to the visit. Okay, now we're going to go on to the closing ceremony. We're going to start with Mr. Jaime Cataldo. He is the General Manager of Emirates and Executive Secretary appointed yesterday of Relagres. So, Jaime, the floor is yours.
Estimado alcalde,
Dear Mr. Mayor, authorities, from the local authorities, from the Catalan government, friends, the different representatives, delegates here, we are very happy with the organization of this 5th International Relagres Seminar. We are very happy that it has been held here in this beautiful city with the wonderful people we've come to know. We've seen that there is progress in terms of the discussion of these issues, new, interesting aspects. We've found certain controversies in certain areas, and you've seen, like we, that the situation in America and Latin America and Europe is different, and that each continent is different. And we've tried to, over the last 2 days, to learn much of this diversity. Here, somebody recently said that we shouldn't copy, and we agree with this. We haven't come here to copy. We have come, indeed, to learn. And please God, that we can learn so as not to make mistakes that have already been made. I mean, we'll make other mistakes quite probably, but at least to ensure that we don't make the same mistakes that have been made in the past. We have, in several of our Latin American countries, we have opted for this, and we hope that the challenges that we are facing will be socialized and we'll see this over the coming meetings. Yesterday, at the annual meeting of Relagres, we also took the decision to hold the next 3 international meetings, the first in La Paz in Bolivia, the second in Montevideo in Uruguay, and the third in Panama City in Panama, and the fourth quite probably will be in Korea, I think the gentleman said. Hopefully we will, over the coming meetings, have achieved more than what we've achieved up till now. And that is why we are seeking an agreement with the foundation concerned with the circular economy. And this morning we've agreed to work with the IDB and also with the PMV program to seek our discussion not only to be accompanied by the different municipalities, but also to see the participation of international organizations to end up with an annual analysis of the situation, which we will do at the next meeting. So for us, therefore, it is very important to count on this cooperation with international organizations, cooperation with international municipalities and cities, and also with waste treatment plants, such as the one here in Maresme. Relagres, too, is going to make the best of this year, not only to organize the coming seminar, but also to establish a technical administrative HQ in Santiago to pick up all of the concerns of our members and also to participate more actively than we have done in the past. We've had dialogues between the different cities where we've seen and analyzed common problems that we have, and we've seen this cooperation occurring, but we want to intensify it over the coming months. Just, Mr. Mayor, to reiterate to all of you, to our friends, to the authorities of Catalonia here, all of the participants in the seminar, to thank you all, because we really do appreciate the fact that we've been here and been able to share all of this with you. Thank you.
A continuación toma la palabra Josep María Tos, director de la agencia.
The floor to Josep María Tos, the director of the Catalan Waste Agency.
Buenos días, presidente de la red Relagres, alcalde de Mataró.
Chairman of Relagres, Mataró Mayor, Director of the Consortium. I think that we have been here after 2 days of very intense discussion. We know at the Catalan Agency that this is not a matter of how we manage our waste, but rather how we reduce the impact on the environment and the so-called climate change. We know, however, that this transition towards new models is not an easy process. It requires time, in our case, 20 years. But as we all know, a big journey begins with just one step, and we need to take it. Catalonia as a country knows, we're very aware that there's still a long way ahead of us, but we are more than willing to exchange and to share and to think about this together, to share our mistakes, because we've learned from them. There are a lot of actions that were undertaken after successes, but also after failures, and to be transparent and loyal to each other, constructive, because at the end of the day, we're a small territory, but we're speaking about the global space we all share, this earth. And this is a matter that we all need to defend in order to improve the legacy that we will give to our children. There are different viewpoints and cultures and perspectives, but the planet is exactly the same for everyone. So we need to come up with better solutions to improve the health of this planet, which is, of course, worsening every day. We need to work on these solutions and to apply them at the local scale, not only the global scale, so that future generations do not see such an impact on their environment. We all want to enjoy high living standards, but of course, those rights should not impede, the rights of our offspring. Let's collaborate. I think that this has been quite an interesting discussion. Several dozen speakers have contributed their knowledge and have reflected upon this together. Relagres is the right forum to exchange information and to work among cities and institutions. So we are here at your entire disposal for anything you need. We also offer our help to the Maresme Consortium, our collaboration, so that amongst all of us we can improve the world for our future generations with the right waste management policies today. Thank you, congratulations, and see you next time.
We'll
give the floor to Mr. David Bote, who is the mayor of Mataró, as well as the president of the Consortium for Municipal Solid Waste Management.
Yo siempre explico que hablar el último acostumbra a ser complicado.
I tend to say that it's so difficult to speak the very last minute of a meeting, and to do so trying to come up with future prospects is even more difficult. So I promise I'll do my best. First, I would like to say it's gone. Well, I don't know. Well, I had 3 items, and all of a sudden I forgot the first one. And if I don't remember it, I'll only give you 2. But the second item I was supposed to tell you, my second idea, had to do with the fact that I've been a mayor for 2 years. 2 years to the date, I was elected mayor by the plenary at the City Hall. And sometimes, you know that you have a lot of issues to deal with every day. It makes matters very complicated. You deal with everything that's urgent and immediate, even the need for our own survival, you know. And citizens, of course, sometimes vote for us, because we take those actions forward, but that involves a lot of thinking. And that means that sometimes the real serious problems, the ones that you know must be dealt with by whoever is in charge because they will eventually become more significant, you need some time to think about them. And sometimes you don't have that luxury. That's why in the case of waste management, this is what tends to happen. Jose Maria talks to a lot of mayors, and he knows that this is a thought shared by all of us. Sometimes there are a lot of walls and mountains, and it's better to climb them one step at a time instead of just overnight when the problem is too daunting and it's impossible to face it. So I hope, as I said back in Chile, I think I conveyed a similar message, that some of the things that you have listened to, experienced, or participated in during these 2 days in Mataró, I hope they're useful to all of us so that we can keep climbing that mountain and to reach the goal that we had all set for ourselves. Jose Maria spoke about management, waste management, and that's exactly what we need to do to take care of our planet. The third idea, I still cannot remember my first idea. Well, it doesn't really matter. My third point was I'm a defender of this network. There's this Italian philosopher who is still alive, and he says that he lives 5 minutes before his time. And I'm convinced that modernity, being a contemporary person today, means not only trying to solve your problems on your own. Being modern means setting up the necessary fora, the necessary spaces to meet with others as social beings that we are and find those solutions together. I think that's our need. That's what we need to continue to do, where we will find solutions to our challenges. And I think that this network is the proper institution to do so. And I just remembered my first point. You know that there are intervals in mathematics, right? There's an interval, some like Monday to Tuesday. Some of them are closed, some of them are open. So we wanted this to happen during these 2 days, but we hope it remains open in the future. And for whatever reason, we keep working with one another in order to attain these common goals. And now that I saw that there are some staff from the technical secretariat that joined us, as I did yesterday, I would like to express my gratitude to the network, the secretariat, and the Catalan Waste Agency, who have co-funded this event, as well as our sponsors and everyone who has been working throughout these days to make this a reality. I hope that you are living our country with a nice memory of this city that has always tried to make the best and offer the best of our contribution. I hope that you enjoy these 2 days. You'll always be welcome to Mataró.